Okay, so
Awesome.
welcome back to Bentley, guys, and we're glad to have you to talk about what you've been up to at EY.
Yeah, no, thanks for having us, Mark. Before we jump in, can we just go around the room and say hi to everybody we have today?
Sure, and you can call on the folks on Zoom first.
Hi, I'm Harrison.
Hi, I'm Kevin.
I'm Matt.
Hi, I'm Jean Bucalia. I'm working in the Career Center with students in CIS.
Awesome.
Hi, I'm Andre.
Andre's over here.
Hey.
And I'm over here. And we have one more person who's coming in as soon as I give them the meeting ID.
Awesome. And folks on the line, do you guys want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hi, my name is Astrid.
Hi, I'm Abby. I'm a first-year student.
Hi, I'm Cam. I'm also a first-year student.
Nice to meet you guys. Yeah, and in terms of years of people in the room or anybody juniors, seniors, thinking about applying, just want to make sure we're tailoring everything correctly here.
So you're a first-year student.
I'm a sophomore.
You're a sophomore.
Okay.
Kevin's a grad student. Jason Harrison's over there as a senior.
Okay.
Abby, Cam, you guys tell us your life stories in a minute.
I think they were first years. Cool. Okay. So
I'm
sounds like
a freshman.
Yeah, freshman. Okay. Cool. So it sounds like we're a little bit more on the full-time than internship. And then some people kind of maybe new to consulting, new to private equity. So we can make sure that we work that in. But really nice to meet you guys. Thanks again for having us. My name's Rob. I'm a 2017 graduate from Bentley. I studied finance as my major. My minor was computer information systems. Worked in the sandbox for like a year and a half, I think. I'm a director now with Parthenon in the software strategy group. I spent a little bit of time at Deloitte and their business technology analyst program right out of school. And yeah, excited to be here today. Excited to talk through what we do and kind of who we are.
Definitely. Thanks, Rob. And I'll go ahead and introduce myself as well. So I'm a 2019 grad from Bentley, CIS major, minor in finance. So I guess the opposite of Rob. Also spent some time working in the sandbox with Professor Freidenberg, Professor Ahmed, and a couple other people in the CIS faculty department. Also worked with career services, which I see we have in the room, which is awesome. Hi to Janet on our end, and just wanted to present to you guys today, teach you a little bit more about what we do. I'm a senior associate, same group as Rob within the software strategy group. And oddly enough, have a pretty similar career, well, I guess educational and career trajectory as Rob. Also spent some time at Deloitte as a business technology analyst, and then ended up coming to software strategy group. So yeah, we'll get into the presentation, but afterward, happy to answer any questions you guys might have as well.
And Jack Donovan just joined us.
Hey, Jack.
Awesome. And Mark, sorry, as we continue, just wanted to make sure that we have someone else on the other Zoom link in case other people join so they can be redirected.
I'm still there.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Great.
Cool. So I guess for the format of this, we have some slides we can run through, but if there's any questions, just kind of jump in, get yourself off mute. Feel free to ask away. But we'll leave a lot of time at the end for Q&A. Essentially, the way that this is going to be structured is just who we are and what do we do, and then some discussions about different projects that we've been on. And then we'll go into logistics of the roles we're looking for to recruit for and kind of how do you apply. But so you guys probably noticed that we're part of EY-Parthenon, and that kind of sits within broader EY. The difference there is not just the blue color scheme versus the yellow, but it's probably a good chance to go into maybe a little bit of a history lesson. So we sit within what's called the software strategy group under EY-Parthenon. That was originally a boutique consulting firm in Boston by the name of Bulger Partners. It was started in the mid 2010s. the founding partner of that, Jeff Fogel, is still the head of our practice today. In 2017, the Bulger Partners team got acquired by Parthenon, by like the legacy strategy arm of EY-Parthenon, and brought us in. So now we're up to 80 people. We sit within Parthenon, which is in EY's consulting organization, specifically focused on private equity. And then there's the rest of EY Consulting, which is more focused on like corporate clients. And then there's tax and audit and all the other fun things that we all know and love being from Bentley. What we really do is a pretty specialized kind of set of services. So we focus on the private equity world. So these are private investors that are going to acquire companies that are not public. They usually own them for 5 years. And we specifically target software companies. So we will help, for example, like a Blackstone or a Bain Capital when they are looking at a specific software company and thinking about acquiring them. They bring us in to do what's called a due diligence project of the market that the company plays in, as well as the technology that the company uses to inform whether or not they should ultimately buy the company. And so we work across 3 offices, but we really have a global footprint. We have an office in London as well. And we've done a lot of projects all over the world. People have gone to Australia, people have gone to Israel, people have gone to Tokyo. I was in Chicago last week, not as exciting, but still fun. And yeah, that's sort of our focus area and where we sit within EY. So it broadly sort of goes software strategy group, then EY-Parthenon, then EY Consulting, and then EY at like the very top. So it's cool because we have a really tight-knit organization of like 80 people, and we all know each other and work together really closely. But we have the benefits of being part of EY and part of the Big Four, and having a network of 300,000 people to tap into. And that's probably a good way to transition into the software strategy group and our mission and vision. So at our core, what we aim to be is strategic advisors to the software economy. And the software economy is sort of defined as companies that are software companies, generally, like SaaS business models. They build software and sell that to B2B or B2C, or companies that are what's called like a tech-enabled services company. Like, for example, Uber is not really a software company. They're tech-enabled services. They have a service, which is someone drives you from point A to point B, but they have software to enable that. So that's sort of what we look at. Our mission is to provide long-term value for both the companies we look at and the investors who buy them, because we want to make sure that our clients are protected in making a 5-year commitment and usually writing a check in the hundreds of millions of dollars to acquire a software company and meet their investment thesis goals, whether those goals are to bring it to the cloud, to launch a new product, to build a new R&D development organization over that 5-year holding period. And we also want to make sure that our companies that we're looking at, the software company that might get acquired, is gaining value as well, because they are also going to have their own goals of what they want to do with the company, what their strategy and vision is going to be. And we're sort of the partner in between all of that make sure that it happens. And the values that sort of stretch across all of that are a commitment to diversity and inclusion. We're really big on that. We're really big on entrepreneurship as well. Given that we're such a small organization, you kind of have to roll your sleeves up a little bit and make sure that you can like use the big EY brand to your disposal whenever you need to, which is always really exciting. And of course, a passion for software and tech, which is why we wanted to talk to you guys today. And so essentially, like I've mentioned this a few times, but we sit at sort of the midpoint between private equity and tech. And the way that I like to think about this is like the benefit you get out of this job is you get exposed to 2 different kinds of mindsets. On the right side, you get exposed to the investor mindset, because these PE firms are spending a lot of money to purchase a company. So you really get to be involved with them in forming what's called their investment thesis, which is essentially the statements or assumptions by which the firm is going to buy the company and work that into their model. Like, for example, if the company is like not on the cloud today, but within the next 5-year holding period, they move to the cloud, there's major impacts on the valuation that the PE firm can get upon exit, because a company that is like not cloud ready typically trades for lower multiples, like EV to EBITDA, if you've seen that in any of your finance classes. And then at the end of the holding period, if they are a SaaS organization and they are on the cloud, then you can get a huge return out of that. It's kind of like flipping a house. So you get exposure to like what actually drives value for a PE model, and like why do our assessments that we're making of like what the strategy is, what the market is, what the competition in that market is, really matter. So that's a great like piece of the puzzle. And then the other side of it is you get exposed to the CTO mindset. As part of our projects, we always get to sit down with the CTOs of like the company that might get acquired and actually interview them and ask them like, what do you see as your strategy? Like, what is going to be the go forward roadmap for this company? Like, what are you actually going to prioritize? Like I'm looking at a company right now that's in like the legal software space, like software for lawyers to use to automate building documents and reviewing documents. And they're $100 million company that might get bought out for like a huge valuation from a PE firm. And they have like a really interesting strategy just around like what projects they want to prioritize, like where they want to invest their R&D team. They've just moved everybody offshore to try to save costs, but then you have to like work in, how do you get productivity and make sure that you're moving towards the deliverables that you need to actually meet the PE firm's revenue targets for you. So there's a lot of like really high level conversations that you get exposed to like that. And it's really cool to like actually be a part of it and like driving the ball forward and hearing about those different conversations. This stat on the bottom, I think, is really telling. Like there are sort of 10 like big mega funds in PE, and we work with 9 of them as our clients. We don't have Thoma Bravo, but it's okay, we're working on them. And there's a yearly private equity report that gets released every year. Of the software deals that have happened around the entire world, like any company that is in the software space that's gotten money from a private investor, there's a 2/3 chance that we've looked at it and been involved. So you really get to see like a super broad spectrum of companies, everything from video game software to robotics software, to like legal software, to infrastructure, cybersecurity, like you name it, like we've looked at it. So that's really what I enjoy about this job. And it's a big reason why I'm kind of still around. And to maybe like get into a little bit more detail on like what it is we actually do. There's an analogy that I mentioned earlier around selling a house. And I think it's pretty applicable here. So buying a company in a private equity space is a lot like buying a home and flipping it in 5 years. And there's different improvements you can make along the way, right? Like you can launch a new product, or you can enter a new market. You can move the software to the cloud and change to a SaaS business model. And all of those things will impact your value upon exit. So as part of our process, what we do is really similar to things that you have to do when you buy a house. And so I mentioned that we do diligence. So diligence essentially means that the PE firm brings you in before they buy the company, and they say, here's the things that we need to understand about this company in order to meet our investment thesis goals. Help us understand those things, and we will ultimately use that to inform whether or not we purchase the firm. Usually, those are split into 2 different types of diligence offerings. One is called commercial diligence, and that's what Parthenon has been known for the past 20 years. And that's really looking at the holistic market, like this number 2 bullet, the housing and market assessment. So this, an example is like I looked at a company that makes DevOps tools, like work for developers to automate certain tasks like testing and QA, or like an IDE, if you're familiar with that. And I had to build a model. It was specifically for like web development. And so I had to find like the total number of websites in the world that use WordPress versus Drupal, and model out like how many of those potential websites could use this company's product, and build a model of like what the total addressable market is, and then juxtapose that against the company we were looking at and all of its competitors. And so that's sort of like looking at the broad market, like a housing assessment. But then we also looked at this company's actual tech that they were using. We looked at their roadmap that they had plans to launch new products in the future. We looked at their stack, like they were built on a SQL database. They had C# and Java business logic. They had like a React native front end, and they had a bunch of developers working on that. So all of those kind of things come together to form what's called a tech diligence. And there's 4 pillars that we typically look at: the product, like I mentioned, the technology, the team that's working on it, and the hosting and cloud position, like is it public cloud, et cetera. And so if we go back to the page we were just on, like that's sort of the first row, is like we're looking at the house itself versus the market. And then the third type of project that we do is what's called a value creation. And those are rows 3, 4, and 5 here. So this is sort of what you might think of when you think of like McKinsey. This is like their type of work. They just come in and help companies with whatever strategy or whatever goals that they want to achieve. So this is after diligence is done, they've bought the company, they bought the house. Now they need to figure out, how do we move around the furniture? How do we fix the roof? How do we hire a contractor to come up with a backyard inspection plan? And so there's a bunch of different types of VC projects that we do. I'm actually on one right now too, where with this legal software company that I just mentioned, like we're helping them actually plan their roadmap and plan their product strategy because they don't have a CPO, a chief product officer. So we're sort of acting as that for the next couple months, which will be really fun. And so those are like the 3 types of projects and how they kind of relate. Yeah, happy to answer more questions on that. I know it's like not totally clear and it was a new concept to me when I first joined the firm, but it is super interesting. And on the next page, we can go into more detail on like our main flagship type of project, which is called a product and technology diligence. So the founders of Bulger Partners pretty much came up with this concept themselves. And it is really important for software companies in particular because there's no factory that you can go look at for software. If you're a PE firm and you're looking at like an industrials company that makes oil and like refines oil, you go to the oil refinery and you look and you see what's going on. With software, there's nothing to look at, there's nothing to see. You don't know really what people are working on. So you need both the like core consulting skill set and you need an expertise in technology to be able to actually drive value here. And so the way that we structure these engagements is they're usually 2 to 3 weeks long. And these are the 4 areas that we look at. So we look at, for the company itself that they might buy, not the broader market, just this company, like what is the product strategy and roadmap that the firm wants to do? What are the capabilities they're offering today? How are they going to change them in the future? Does the roadmap align with what's actually happening in the market? Like, for example, I looked at a company that was an ERP, like an enterprise resource planning software for specific different types of like verticals, and they were in Europe. And they were spending a ton of money on one product that was related to shipment and manufacturing of wood. Like there was software for like wood and lumber refineries, basically. And they had another product that was more focused on like steel refineries and steel factories. And so trying to understand like where they're spending their roadmap dollars and where they're actually innovating in the software versus what's going on in the broader market is really important and like should inform our assessment of those different companies and like whether or not we think it's a viable product strategy. And then the rest of these other pillars sort of support what's going on product. Like if you're developing a new piece of technology, but the underlying tech you have today in the second column is really like not scalable, the code is not written in a way that people can understand, there's a lot of technical debt, things might be going out of maintenance, like if you're using an old version of different software products, you have to go back and replace that before you can actually innovate and meet your roadmap goals. So it's super important for our PE firms that they actually understand what do they need to invest in to fix before we can do what we want to do on the roadmap. And then the third pillar is like, there's all these people that are working on these different projects within the company. Do we have the right number of developers to innovate and drive what we want to do on the strategy side? Do we have the right number of QA, like testers? Or are we just releasing code that's completely buggy and we can't actually do anything with it because we don't have people testing? We have a ton of money that we've invested in our benchmarking peer set. We do a quarterly CTO survey to create 1,000 company peer set that says, oh, companies of your size and your growth, they actually have 10% more developers than you do. So you might want to go out and hire some of those people as part of your strategy over the next 5 years. And by the way, the tech that you're using is super outdated. So you have to hire people that know this technology and they're really hard to find. So you might want to think about changing to something a little bit more common. Like if you're still using like COBOL, which is a coding language from like the 70s, and you're trying to hire new graduates, you might need to change to like Python or something that's a little bit more scalable and a little bit more popular in universities like Bentley. And then the last is hosting in cloud. So it's like, where does all this software live? Is it in a data center that's not really going to be scalable, that might lead to cost inefficiencies going forward? Or can we move it to the public cloud to get into a SaaS valuation football field of multiples? And to do that, how do we get from point A to point B? Like, what's the actual cost that we need to invest? And so all of this comes together into a report that we package up and send to the PE firm. And we meet with them twice throughout the course of the project, usually once at the beginning, once at the end, and we give them the findings. And then they take this and they bring it to what's called their investment committee, who is the people that have actually invested in their fund. And it's like a big game of Shark Tank where they say, okay, Parthenon said that this is a pretty good company. We like the revenue, we like the market, we like the tech, let's buy it. And then it's pretty cool because you get to see like in the Wall Street Journal, like, oh, $3 billion acquisition of a legal tech company. Cool, like that. I looked at that, like I actually helped them come to that conclusion. So that's sort of like our focus areas and like the day-to-day of what we do. We have a ton more examples of different projects. I know I've sprinkled in a few, but Luca, you've been here for a while. Like, do you want to go through some of the cool projects that you've been on and like some that we have in the deck here?
Yeah, definitely. I'll start off with some of my personal experience and then we can move on to the ones in the presentation. But I actually had a project which I thought was really fascinating from the tech point of view, that specific pillar that Rob was talking about. It was a cybersecurity company really focused on creating cybersecurity solutions with proprietary like AI. So they had a huge team of data science PhDs that they were super focused on hiring and retaining to basically come up with these in-house models that were completely different from anything else in the market. And they had what is called like a technical moat, and it was super wide. So they were basically very well positioned in this space with these proprietary models that they had created to win out in their competition. So it was a great analysis that we were able to do there between how they were retaining their really specialized R&D personnel, and then also in addition creating super specific models on the tech point of view with all the AI know-how that they had, and using all these modern different technologies to basically not just create the models, but run them as well. So these are some of the examples of the things that you can learn here. I think that this job, as Rob was mentioning, gives you a ton of super relevant exposure to not just the entire tech ecosystem and landscape, but also how investors think, what they think is a good investment and why they think it's a good investment. What are some red flags that they are potentially considering? And it helps you put yourself in their shoes and their mindset as well from the tech point of view. So I think bringing those two things together, as you saw in that Venn diagram earlier, is super important. But we can go into a couple of examples of super interesting cases that we've done over the past couple of years. Rob, if you want to go ahead and cover this one, I can move on to that.
Yeah, some of these were before like our time, but they are like really cool. Like this drone delivery one was like right when I first started. I wasn't on it, but essentially the company was actually backed by, if you guys know Bono from U2, the singer, he invested in this, and it was like an early stage startup that was autonomous software for drones. And the use case was delivering medications to third world countries and transferring it without someone actually needing to be involved. So it was really cool. Like there was a tech diligence, so they were looking at like, what does the software on the drones actually like enable? How does it steer them? Is it going to be scalable? Like, can we take the software off the drone and like apply it to other companies and like license it out? That's typically like a pretty big facet of projects that have hardware and software. To use an example of one that I was actually on, I looked at a company that was self-driving robots for factories. Like you'd buy it if you were like an Amazon like packing location, and the robots would like transfer pallets through, and there was software on the robot itself that was stereoscopic cameras that had machine learning built in to know what objects were like familiar to the robot and which ones were not. And there was also software on a computer that the factory owner would like run that governed what the routes should be for all the robots to make sure they didn't run into each other on the factory floor. And it was super cool. It was like a similar investment thesis, which was like the company at that time had a partnership with Toyota, and they only built their software for Toyota like pallet drivers. And so how could they abstract away their software from the Toyota relationship and sell it to like other pallet companies was basically like the thesis there. And yeah, it was super cool. Like I got to go to Pittsburgh and like meet the person that wrote all the code for the robot and like see a private equity partner in his deal sleds like try to ride one of these things around the factory and like almost fall off. So super fun project. We also looked at a bunch of other like different types of similar things. Like on the next page, we have one about like agro-tech and IoT. I've never been on an agro-tech project, but it sounds cool. I've done IoT though. Like I did a project that was cybersecurity for Internet of Things enabled devices. Like if you think about, there was a Wall Street Journal article from like 2017 of a casino that got hacked because someone hacked into the fish tank thermometer because it was a smart thermometer and then used that to steal a bunch of money. So this company's like big clients were like Fortune 500 companies and like casinos. And it was cool. Like we were really looking at what does their strategy to like get to cloud actually look like, because everything had to be hosted out of the customers on-premises data centers, and they wanted to move to cloud and build a essentially like a smaller version of a server that would go into the customer's closet and then link back to the actual like public cloud that they were on. And there was like a startup in the middle of the project that got a huge venture funding from Google. And then our scope kind of changed to like, what could this company do to like disrupt us? So a lot of interesting things on that one. And then the last is like mainframe software is one that we surprisingly look at. And like, I didn't even know what this was before I joined, but it's software that is like, when you think about a computer from like the 70s, like it takes up a whole room and you have to like switcher boards. It's one of those kinds of things. There's a company in Waltham that actually does it. It's called Rocket Software. And so essentially like this project was all about how do we continue to maintain our products and use only offshore developers and get as high of an expense to revenue ratio as possible on R&D as a percentage of the product's revenue, like what we have to actually do to invest in it versus how much it makes. So super interesting. And like, it's crazy how many industries still rely on this. Like the whole financial system, Bloomberg uses it. The airline system, like Sabre, that does the tickets for airlines, relies on it. So it's cool to see like the backbone of a lot of these really high-tech scalable companies and like what it relies on, and then how do you like maintain that over time. But yeah, I've also looked at, I don't know if you guys are like into gaming at all, but like, RuneScape, does anybody know that? Yeah. So RuneScape got a huge investment from Carlyle over the summer. I led that project with Carlyle. It was really cool. And I got to see a demo of their new game that's coming out. It's like a Fortnite style type approach. There was another consulting firm, that's like a random tangent, but there was another consulting firm involved in that was doing analytics of the RuneScape subreddit while we were like looking at the tech, and they were looking at like, what are people talking about and how does that then tie into the roadmap of what they should build. And so we were like working with them of like trying to inform the product strategy based off of Reddit. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, we end up doing definitely a lot of different types of projects, which, as Rob's mentioning, between mainframe, agro-tech, and RuneScape, you get exposure to pretty much every single vertical within the tech ecosystem or the tech landscape. So yeah, I mean, imagine just having to do like data analysis on Reddit comments. Like that seems like pretty interesting sort of work. And really what we're seeking to talk to you guys about is the opportunities that we present for you to potentially be able to join us in the future. And right now we're hiring for summer associates, which are internship positions, and then associate positions, which are full-time positions. And really what this opportunity is the ability to, sorry about that. Yeah, the ability to really build new skills. And can everyone see my screen? I think it may have been paused. Yeah, great.
Yeah, your screen's fine.
Oh, okay, awesome. So really the ability to build new skills and create a
course.
network. And through this network, learn how software companies and investors are being able to succeed in the space. And we provided the advice to allow them to be able to do that. And through this, we provide what is called the associateship program, which aims to really be able to teach you the skills needed to be able to conduct this analysis and really create a great foundation for your career. And for this, we look for people that have an interest in both software and technology and investments as well with private equity, which is why we're here presenting it at CIS Sandbox.
This role was made for CIS students at Bentley, is what we're saying.
Exactly. So kind of moving here forward, with this role, you should be able to get the access and experience to C-suite executives throughout the entire tech ecosystem and internally as well. So we work with a lot of previous CTOs and CEOs within our own practice that are called executive directors, and they know a ton about technology. They've been in the space for decades at this point, and they're sort of our almost like internal professors and tech experts, and basically teach us about tech and other sorts of information on every single case that we work with them on, and really help us develop as professionals through all this learning in the career. You also develop a ton of hard and soft skills. So really understanding how to synthesize data, conduct qualitative and quantitative, like complicated data analysis, understanding what makes a company work, what are the red flags in a company, why investment teams should invest or not. And all these sorts of things kind of come together into really developing better hard and soft skills. And then also dedication to technology. As Rob was mentioning, we focus specifically on the software landscape, on the tech landscape, and really understanding what drives this market is something that you'll be able to develop through all the reps and time that you could spend at SSG. And in order to develop these skills in the most sort of holistic manner, what SSG would ask from you is a 3-year commitment, essentially, which is the associateship program, which we've rolled out, which comes with its own set of benefits as well. And really, you would receive a graduation bonus after the end of these years, as mentioned here on the slide. And Rob, if you have anything else to add there, feel free.
No, I mean, I think you hit it all. The executive director point is really a good one, because it's something that I don't think is like really talked about at other consulting firms, but we have a network of like a couple internal subject matter experts. There's like, I think we're up to like 10 of them now out of our 80 people. And these are people that we've worked with over the course of the last 5 or so years. They're friends with basically Jeff Vogel, who's the founding partner. And it's all former CTOs. So like on the RuneScape project, for example, the ED executive director on it was like CTO of a gaming company for a little while. And he knew a ton, and he had a ton of industry connections. And he connected us with his friend from college who happened to be the head of the MIT Sloan gaming center. And we got to interview him for an hour and talk about like the Unreal 5 engine and how Epic is using it and how like other companies might be able to like build off of it as well. On the robotics project, like there was a guy who had built software for a robotics company in the past and worked with like the coding languages that they used. And he was also the CTO of Fidelity. So he knows a ton about mainframes because Fidelity uses mainframes. And they're just such a great resource. Like it is honestly like having someone who's both a professor and a technology expert and an expert at like talking to private equity in your corner. And they can kind of give that like credibility of, what a 26-year-old director is saying on a project is actually right. And like, you should listen to them. So it's really fun to like be able to learn from them and to be able to leverage them when like talking to the clients. So yeah, it's definitely a really, really cool resource that like to compare to like Deloitte, for example, it's just something that they don't have.
Yeah, definitely. I couldn't agree more with that. And it's we were both at Deloitte as well. So we've had experience there, as we mentioned at the beginning of the presentation. And it's really something that is very unique to SSG, the ability to talk to these people and develop a relationship with with them and really understand so much more about technology from their point of view, because they've lived it hands-on for many years. But kind of going on to the next section, these are some of the things that you could do on a daily basis, really, at SSG. Sometimes you'll do one of these per day. Sometimes you'll focus your entire day on that one, or sometimes you might even do all 7. And it kind of speaks volumes to how varied this job can be, but also everything is focused around the software economy, as we call it here. So, in a typical project lifecycle, which is roughly 2 to 3 weeks, you'll get the opportunity to analyze company data, a bunch of documents that really understand how the company functions, what the product is, what tech they're using, how their R&D organization is set up and organized. You'll be able to, start building all these sorts of findings into a presentation and a report to basically meet with and present to the findings to the client. And this report is gonna be created from a variety of different factors, whether it's you collaborating with the managing directors that Rob mentioned and getting their expertise in this given market or area, meeting with the executives from the company that the PE firm is looking to acquire, estimating the growth and the size of the market, really analyzing like what competitors are out there, how do they differentiate from the current company that you're evaluating, how is the company perhaps better than them or worse, and conducting all these calls with industry experts as well. So you get to learn from all these different sources, essentially, and from all that information, compile an analysis based on those 4 pillars that Rob mentioned, and really present them to the client. And in addition to that, in addition to the client work, you'll really be able to also contribute to SSG and to EY as well, and build out the practice, whether it's through professional development or recruiting, as Rob and I are doing right now, or creating sector books or research for SSG. So you have all these other opportunities to really get involved and contribute to the growth of SSG, not just from the client-facing side, but from the internal side as well.
Yep. I can literally think of a day last week where I did every single thing on this slide. Like I was in Chicago for a value creation project. So they already got invested in by the PE firm. There's a bunch of problems and they want us to help solve them. And I went in, we met with the CEO, CTO, head of the business unit, VP of product, and VP of engineering in a day. They gave us access to, do you guys know Jira? What developers use to track stories and what they're working on? If you don't know it, it's very, very common in software. And there's a ton of data behind it. So we analyzed a spreadsheet with 50,000 rows that showed what they were actually spending their time on. Showed it to the managing director on our project, who ran software at a law firm for a little while, so knows a ton about this stuff. We presented it to the client. That was actually the next day, so I guess I kind of lied. Presented the findings to the client. We talked to a bunch of people that either used to work at the company or are customers of the company, so the industry experts, to help inform what the roadmap should be, what they should be working on versus what they are working on. And yeah, hopefully after this project is done, some of the capabilities we've built out will be used on other projects. So yeah, it's definitely the day-to-day varies a lot, but there's just so much that can get thrown at you. It's really interesting. It keeps you on your toes. To compare to other consulting firms, our projects are a lot shorter. So you go in and you get the work done and then you kind of move on. But it's great too, because you get to see so much. In 2.5 years, I've seen almost between 45 and 50 companies. And I never would have got that exposure had I stayed in my last role. I was 2 years there and I looked at 3 companies.
Yeah, similar experience to Rob. I joined about 9 months ago, and I just wrapped up my 11th project. So it's kind of crazy the speed at which these things can come, and it's really great because you learn so much in such a short amount of time, and you get so much exposure to different sorts of companies. I've looked at everything from that cybersecurity one I mentioned to looking at e-commerce companies, data center management companies, data analytics companies, warehouses, data warehouses, etc. So you look at a bunch of different sorts of tech companies and really be able to get a better grasp of what is being bought out and why. But kind of moving on here, it's a lot of people come to SSG obviously from a bunch of different schools and with different sorts of professional or academic goals. And if people decide to stay here, they can grow very well with SSG, but there's also a lot of great opportunities for people to move on after SSG. And a lot of our members have pursued educational opportunities, either doing their MBAs or dual degree programs elsewhere. People have gone to investing related roles within venture capital, private equity, and have also gone to like large tech companies as well, such as some of the companies that we can see out there, or startups as well. So not just big tech, but startups too, cybersecurity companies. And these are all sorts of different roles that you can have after SSG. But what this speaks to is the variety of work that we do here and all the doors that it could potentially open for you afterward as well.
Yeah. If you're interested in PE, it's definitely a path to get there that isn't investment banking. So better hours. And if you're interested in tech and strategy, it's a path to accelerate where you come in at. Like someone who was, I'm a 2017 grad, so someone who's my year, just left for Microsoft, and she's a manager on their corp dev team, and they looked at TikTok and they got outbid by Oracle. Like she led that project for them. So there's like a lot you can do. And like, I've been in the professional world for 4 years.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy the exposure that you can get here for sure. And really what we're looking for in terms of the values of the people that we want to see join SSG is to have an excellence reflex. What this basically means is that if you see something that can be fixed, go ahead and be proactive and fix it instead of kind of just waiting around to see what happens to it, essentially. We really also look for people with intense curiosity. You don't necessarily have to have a certain set of skills to join SSG in terms of like technical skills or like perhaps experience, but what we really look for is the ability to be curious, to learn, to want to absorb new information. And if you see something that you don't understand, take your time to learn about it, ask the right questions. Obviously, honesty and integrity, a drive for value, being able to really understand and put yourself in the shoes of the investors. Personally, when I was at Bentley, I was part of the Bentley Investment Group, which I thought was a great group on campus. I helped lead one of the sectors, the TMT sector. And being part of this group helped me put myself in that investor mindset, which is a lot of what we do at SSG. What is the investment thesis? What do these investors want to, what questions do they want to have answered? How does this company fit into what they want to do with it? And basically create a customized or tailored report for them to answer those questions. And lastly, obviously focus on teamwork. Like our projects are pretty short. We depend a lot on our teammates to get the work done in a timely manner. And depending on them means that you need to focus on being able to be a great teammate, which I know personally, and Rob does as well, that Bentley has a huge focus on with all the group projects that you guys do there. So awesome. And yeah, these are some of the events that we do, either larger EY events or summer outings, book clubs that we have, trips, harbor cruises, all the good stuff that we do throughout the year that we plan for people. And obviously, if you join during the internship, we'll have a lot of fun summer events too. We had a boat cruise this summer, and with hopefully COVID turning more positive corner and leaving sometime soon, we'll be able to have more of these events in person.
Yeah, I'm jealous of our interns.
Yeah.
All the fun stuff they get to do.
And yeah, these are kind of our office locations too. So we have the largest presence in Boston and quickly growing in other offices as well. So New York and San Francisco. And yeah, we're a small group, but growing pretty quickly. So it's a little bit under 100 people right now, I believe, and we just had a new class join, but really growing fast in these 3 locations. So these are available to you for you guys to apply pretty much anywhere that you see here. Awesome. Kind of our process. So, this is the information session, then comes a resume drop, first round interviews. And if you're able to, get through those and get approved, then we'll do final round interviews. And after that, if eligible, offers will be made. And, some of the resume considerations, as I mentioned, you don't necessarily have to have a certain set of skills to join SSG. what we really look for is a demonstrated interest in technology, and that can be either through personal interest, coursework, projects, professional experiences you've had, and just overall, leadership experience, good academic standing, and things like this that you'd look for in employers would look for in internships, but really with a focus in the tech economy and the software economy. And then, yeah, for first round interviews, more of your typical case interviews for consulting, as it says here, market sizing, qualitative skills, as well as, understanding how businesses function, how do they achieve their goals. And once again, that demonstrated interest for tech. And lastly, final round interviews would be a lot of the other things that we mentioned throughout this presentation. And obviously your intellectual curiosity, wanting to learn, wanting to absorb new content and do your research on what SSG does. And coming to these sessions is a great first step. So here are some more defined timelines, some contact information as well. And so today being September 29th is the info session. The resume drop deadline will be on October 8th. In mid-October is when the first round interviews begin. And lastly, in late October is when the final round interviews would be, and the offers made soon after that. So to be able to apply, you guys can go to ey.com, the EY-Parthenon careers, and be able to see all the different sorts of positions that we have open there. So, SSG is positions that we have open at SSG for internship and full-time are some of the positions that EY has open, but there's also a lot of other great opportunities on there as well. So that'll give you a chance to look at pretty much everything that EY offers. But if you are interested specifically in SSG, you can use the search function to look for SSG. So that being said, that is basically how to apply. But if you have any specific questions, feel free to reach out to either Rob or myself. And here's our contact info, our emails. And yeah, feel free to send us an email with any questions. But unless Rob has anything else to add, we're open to questions from you guys.
No, none for me. Fire away, guys.
Luca, did you come into Bentley knowing you wanted to study CIS, or did you come in thinking like finance or accounting and then kind of switch into CIS?
I actually came into Bentley thinking that I wanted to study CIS. So yeah, I was pretty decided from the beginning on that. But Rob studied finance, so he has a different story as to how he ended up here.
Yep. Yeah, I studied finance. I actually, funny enough, was originally accounting. I got an offer for an audit internship at PwC and then decided I didn't want to do that. Then I took a strategy internship at CVS, did that, then applied to Deloitte, was there for 2 years, and then found out about this and applied here.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
So obviously I'm a freshman, so I'm a bit far away from this,
I have a
but
quick question in terms of
Oh wait, we had someone in the room asking a
There's
question.
someone in the room first.
oh sorry about that.
no, you're fine. So I'm a bit far from this, but what would you guys think, maybe in terms of courses or even clubs that I can do to kind of, best prepare myself, to kind of be in the best position to get an opportunity with SSG?
Yeah, good question. I'd say looking for the consulting club would be a good start. When I was on campus, I was president of that for a little bit, but was in it for like 3 years. We typically like to see like leadership roles, not just like showing up to the meetings, but like actually like really being involved. So to the extent that you can do that, that'd be great. And there's like really good case experience too. Like a case interview is a big part of our recruiting process. So it'll prepare you for that. And you'll get to like actually try it out a little bit. Like I think they still do the like Harvard Consulting Case Club event. And that's like super interesting and like gives you a feel for what this could really be like and if it's for you. So I'd recommend that one. I'd recommend CS courses too, like whatever you can take. There was a database and like SQL course I took that was really, really good. So I'd recommend trying to get into that. And if you can add CIS as either like your minor or your major, for SSG, like that's a big requirement. Like we try to look for someone that has demonstrated interest and passion for technology, rather than just kind of like saying you're interested in it. But Yeah, those are two that I can think of. Luca did Big, and Big is a good one too, because it helps you understand like what drives value in an investment and like how do you evaluate between like option A and option B and like which one's better and why, because that's a big part of our job too. So that, yeah, I think those are some good ones. I don't know, Luca, if there's anything else you'd recommend.
What's
Yeah,
your experience?
I would also, I mean, not really getting involved in, but it's more visiting career services. I was really involved with career services when I was at Bentley, and I think that they're incredibly helpful. It just takes some, initiative from you as a student to go and visit them, sit down, have them review your cover letter, your resume, your materials, and ask them any questions. So I would, huge proponent on visiting career services. And yeah, in terms of joining Big, Big has a lot of sectors. It's a great group. I think obviously the most helpful one would be TMT, but also a little bit biased there because I used to run the TMC sector. So
Yeah,
What about
tech,
your
media, fun stuff.
What about your experiences down here in the sandbox? Do you think that influenced your abilities to communicate or share ideas, or was that useful in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like the most important part of this job is being able to communicate concepts about technology to private equity investors who don't know anything about it. And so saying, the code has stored procedures in the database from the business logic is going to mean nothing to a private equity investor. But saying like, oh no, they've written scripts that combine what's going on in the database with the business logic. And if you don't fix that, it could impact scalability and you might not be able to deliver the new product you want to build, or you might not be able to expand into the new market. So you're going to have to invest this much money to fix it. And so that's something that I really took away from the CIS sandbox, was like taking concepts that are pretty complicated about technology and explaining it to people that are new at it or want to learn it, or use analogies to help kind of drive to those conclusions.
Yeah, completely agree. And, not just participating in the sandbox events and tutoring, but also just, being part of the sandbox community, and getting to learn from professors and everything in the sandbox as well. So I'd say spending time there is great. And personally as a tutor, as Rob mentioned, you get to learn complex topics and explain them to people who might not be as familiar with them in a more simple way. And that's a lot of what we do in our day-to-day too. So.
Hello, you're next. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah, so just a quick question on my end in terms of the case interviews. How do you guys, what kind of tips do you guys have for us just to incorporate how we would incorporate technology and software into that case interview? Obviously there's the business aspect, but what kind of tips do you have in the case interview for us to keep in mind on the technology and software side of things?
Yeah, I mean, so our cases by nature are focused on tech. Like we don't ask like, how many coffee shops are there in the US? Like we don't care. So that'll kind of come a little bit with just like the conversation in general. But I would say like what to study up on just from a tech perspective is like the business model aspect of like the fact that it's subscription, and how that flows into like the costs that a tech company has to incur. Like the COGS line item of a tech company is related more to hosting, whereas like the COGS line item for a factory is related to like the machinery that you have to buy to build the product. And then similarly, like with tech companies, the R&D line item of the financials is like you build the software one time and then it scales infinitely for multiple customers. So like having that in the back of your mind when you're talking about revenue and growth and how it impacts the profitability is definitely one. The other aspect too is just like when you make recommendations on the business model and like the product, thinking about the other pillars that we went through of like how it impacts the tech and the team working on it and how it's hosted. Like for example, if you're talking about a piece of ed tech software and the case is about like how to scale it to get an infinite number of essays that it reviews, like a turnitin.com type thing. Thinking about like, okay, well, what is the tech that you need to build out to like actually support this? Like, can you do it with just like one little SQL database, or like what do you have to actually like have from a scalability standpoint. So all of those things will kind of like be threaded together. And we also have another case that's more like interviewer driven, where it's like, here's a company, here's like their market, do a market sizing question real quick. Okay, now we're going to talk about like a bunch of different other topics and how do you like tie them together? Because like going back to Mark's question earlier, just about like the sandbox, like that's another aspect I think that was really helpful about it. It's just understanding how different concepts and technology all tie together, and threading that into like some of your answers as well.
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you.
Were there any specific courses or other experiences on campus that really helped you as you started your jobs at EY?
Yeah, I think that courses on campus, a lot of the, oh, I think my camera just turned off. But a lot of the CIS courses on campus were really great. In particular, I think there's one I took with Professor Wagisback, which I thought was pretty awesome. Taught you about systems architecture and design, and really understanding a little bit more about this course and kind of like what was expected when looking at a system, like what are the things that you should evaluate, what architecture components are interesting and could potentially be, flawed in the system or legacy, be legacy components, was something that I learned in that course. That's a major course only, I believe, though. I mean, you can take it if you're not taking the major, but it contributes directly to the major. The course that Rob was mentioning as well, the database course, I believe that's 350, took that with Ahmed. And that was a great course as well. And then other activities, some of the ones we mentioned, I think, being part of BIG, the Bentley Consulting Group too, and getting exposure to career services, the sandbox, going to career fairs too. I think that this helps you in a way, like obviously it opens up doors and opportunities that you'd like to, work with or perhaps see what companies are out there, but it also gives you the chance to, almost practice talking to other professionals, giving your elevator pitch, seeing, presenting your resume, and shows you what other opportunities are out there. So, don't be afraid to reach out. Some of the people on this call have even reached out personally to Rob and myself on LinkedIn, and that really makes a difference. So yeah, feel free to, reach out to people doing positions that you're interested in, and network.
In terms of courses, like the tech ones are obviously really practical. Like we make recommendations about like, oh yeah, they should have less defects in their code. But if you don't really understand, like, what does it take to debug code? Like you can't make that recommendation. So that's a big part of it. The finance courses are obviously really helpful too, like understanding valuation models of like, how do you actually value a private company? And I think there's a bunch of courses on that, but like the ones where you're doing DCFs and like the comparable companies analysis and like the precedent transaction value analysis is really helpful. And I think has given me a leg up within SSG because we typically recruit from like Brown and Dartmouth and like other Ivy League schools where they don't have finance majors. They're just like really smart kids and like engineers. So having that knowledge is like always really, really helpful. And then I'd say also like, I think a common mistake a lot of Bentley kids make is like they don't take the writing classes and the humanities classes very seriously. And like, man, writing is so important in consulting and just like business in general. Like, I don't know, I still even like am getting better and better at it every day, but like the ability to communicate concisely in written format is just like a skill that will help you so much in your career. And I don't want to like understate like that taking those courses and making sure you're doing well in them and getting actually something out of it and not just like completing the paper like the night before as quick as you can is so worth it. It like pays dividends. And then yeah, things on campus, I think we've mentioned a bunch. Sandbox, Bentley Consulting, BIG. There's probably some new clubs too, like, I don't know, anything around like something in tech or finance that you're passionate about is always gonna serve you well. Like if you're really passionate about crypto and there's a crypto club, join it and like start it. And if you're like doing something cool and like building something tangible and real that you can talk about on a resume, like that's going to be better than being a general member of Big any day.
The last question I have for you guys, which I don't think you yet talked about, is what's a typical, to the extent that it's typical, workday or work week like for you guys? I'm guessing, I can't tell if you're home or in your office, or if you're working at home, if you guys are back in your office yet, and like what time do you start? What time do you finish? How's the work-life balance? All that sort of stuff.
Yeah, good question. So we're back to a 4-day-a-week model in the office. Wednesday is actually like our work from home day. So we're both home. Project cadence, it's probably like the easiest to start with that. So a tech diligence project is typically 2 to 3 weeks long. A commercial diligence, like a market study project, is typically 4 to 5. And then a value creation is like 6 weeks to 3 months. We've had 1 3-month project, like that was an outlier, but most of them fall into that like 2 to 3 week timeline. And the timeline of your day is really dependent on where you're at in the project. So for example, like the major events that have to happen in that 2 weeks are you have to get all the company's data and analyze it. You have to meet with the management team and interview them. Usually that takes anywhere from 4 to 8 hours of your time. You have to build the report. You make an interim report midway through and present it to the client. And then you make a final report at the end. And so let's say, for example, this is a 2-week project. You meet with the target company Wednesday of week 1, you check in with the client Friday of week 1, and then you work for week 2. Your Monday is going to be like a little bit easier. Like you log in at 9 or by like 5, 6 o'clock.
Come back later.
And you're just like synthesizing data and like reading what the company, like what do they do? Because you're dropped into this project with like no knowledge of what the company does or who they are. So you have to get up to speed really quickly. So that's like the beginning of the Monday, Tuesday. The Wednesday when you meet with the target company takes a while. So that's like a bit of a longer day. Thursday is a bit of a longer day because you're like wrapping up the report. Then you present it Friday and you have like a nice easy Friday after that. And then week 2, it's kind of the same thing. Like Monday is a little bit easier and it ramps up to Thursday. And then Friday is like a really chill day after you present. And then you're done with the project and you might have a week off. Like you might just be on the bench. And when that happens, you do other side projects that you're working on. Like I'm currently, Luca and I are actually working on a program to give people externships where like if you worked at Parthenon for 2 years and you want to like try working at a software company that's like a Series A startup, but you don't want to risk it going under and you losing a job, you can go do that and then like come back after a little while. So, but other people are working on like that CTO survey that I mentioned. They interview CTOs to get benchmarks for our data set. There's a bunch of different projects going on. So really varies like the typical day, but it typically like follows the cadence of like early in the week is more chill. Thursday's a longer day. Friday's really easy. And then you have like time off to relax before the next project starts.
This is just something I was curious about like your presentation and all that. Let's say you go through the evaluation process for a specific company and you find that this company isn't worth investing. It's not going to work. You don't think it's, the P is making a bad decision. How do you kind of approach that and kind of talk to the private equity firm about that?
Yeah, no, really, really good question. So the first thing is like, we don't know what price they're paying. So that's like a really big portion of it too. Like it might not be worth it at a SaaS valuation, but if they can get it for a discount, then, that's potentially a different story. But overall, like our role here is to be an objective third party. We try to not directly say you should not buy this company, or if it was my money, I wouldn't buy this company. Like that's something we stay away from. But what we do is we break down the overall should you buy this company question into like sub questions, like what is the state of the company's product strategy? How scalable is its technology? To what extent are their developers aligned to the product strategy, and are they actually productive? And so with those individual questions, we can give answers that are like their product strategy really isn't aligned to market demands and they don't have a clear vision to achieve it. Their technology stack is legacy and dated and not scalable, and you need to invest money to fix it. And their team is really understaffed. They don't have enough developers, but they have a ton of product managers and work's not really getting done. And we can tell that story and then tie it back to And if your goal is to launch this product and bring it to the cloud in 5 years to get a SaaS valuation on exit, it's going to be very difficult for you to do that. And that sort of start to end tying the story together with like specific questions typically translates very well, because what then the PE firm does is they have like scenarios in their model that says like bull case scenario is we bring this product to market in 2 years, base case is it takes 4 years, downside case is it never happens. And if we say, you know, the product strategy really needs some work, they probably choose the downside case in their model, then that impacts the revenue growth, and then that impacts their EV to EBITDA multiples upon exit. And then they take that to their committee and they say, you know, this is what we're coming out at. We might want to pass on this. So there's a lot of steps along the way from our report to a go, no-go decision. While we do have like really direct impact on that, like there is a lot of messaging around how does it tie to the actual investment thesis? Because like that's sort of the North Star of what guides our projects.
Cool.
Chris, thank you for being here. We need to bring this to a close because classes are beginning at 3:30.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great to see you. I want to point out next week, EY is back in the sandbox again. Scott Rao is going to be here. He's an audit manager, and Anya Kliansky is a tech risk senior, and Kristen Schmidt, who's the campus recruiter, are going to be doing an online session on Tuesday at 2 o'clock to talk about careers and internships at EY as well. So we'll send that out on Sandbox Instagram and also through your teachers. So come on back on next Tuesday for EY part 2, I guess. Thank you guys for being here.
Yeah, thanks guys. If there's any other questions you have, Luca posted our contact info, but feel free to reach out, LinkedIn, connect, and yeah, we can continue the conversation. But just so you know, like the resume drop is next Friday, the 8th, and we already have a bunch of resumes, like we're reviewing them now. So if you're interested, I'd recommend applying like today.
And pop that in chat. Cool. And Roger, after your email in chat also for.
Oh yeah.
I
I think Luca already beat me to it.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thanks guys. See ya.
Good to see you back here. Bye.